consuming fire, fan into flame, a passion for your name. Spirit of God, would you fall in this place?
Hello and welcome to our devotion for this morning. Well, it's getting light earlier. The weather is warming up, although we've still had some very cold days as well. The birds are chirping and there are many signs that spring is coming. And yes, today we also look at reading the signs around us and what Jesus has to say about that. So I'm going to read from Luke chapter 12, verses 49 to 56. I have come to bring fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. But I have a baptism to undergo, and what constraint I am under until it is completed. Do you think I came to bring peace on earth? No, I tell you, but division. From now on there will be 5 in one family divided against each other, 3 against 2 and 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son and son against father, mother against daughter and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. He said to the crowd, when you see a cloud rising in the west, immediately you say, it's going to rain, and it does. And when the south wind blows, you say, it's going to be hot, and it is. Hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the sky. How is it that you don't know how to interpret this present time? Hear the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Of Elijah, declaring the word of the Lord. And these are the days of your servant Moses, righteousness being restored. And though these are days of great trial, of famine and darkness and sword, still we are the voice in the desert, crying, prepare ye the way of the Lord. Behold, he comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun. At the trumpet call, lift your voice, the year of Jubilee, and out of Zion till salvation comes. And these are the days of Ezekiel, the dry bones becoming his flesh. And these are the days of your servant David, rebuilding a temple of praise. And these are the days of the harvest, for the fields are as white in your world. And we are the laborers in your vineyard, declaring the word
So today's gospel reading from Luke isn't a typical gentle word of assurance. Rather, it's like a clarion call to wake up, to discern the times, and to understand the cost and the urgency of discipleship. It may even have unsettled you when I read it out. So let's take a closer look at what this passage is saying to us. We'll look at its historical context and its cultural context as well, because we can learn from that. And let's see what comes up. So to appreciate the depth of Jesus' words, we have to walk back into the world in which he spoke. Jesus ministered during a time where everything was simmering. It was getting ready to boil. There was Roman occupation, a huge religious expectation on the part of the Jews about the coming of the Messiah, that he was going to come anytime soon, and a lot of social tension. The Jewish people, of course, yearned for deliverance. They were seeking prophets, signs from the heavens, and, of course, this promised Messiah that would restore peace. But before restoring peace, restore nationhood. But the peace that they looked for, I guess, was a political liberation. Liberation from the Romans. They thought that that would bring peace. And social harmony. Not the radical transformation of the heart and the transformation of a community that Jesus came to proclaim. So Jesus mentions fire coming down. This is packed with biblical imagery. Throughout the Bible, fire signifies purification and judgment. And of course, the presence of God. Who can forget James and John wanting to call down fire on the Samaritans who rejected Jesus? That was the fire of judgment. But recall the fire that surrounded or consumed the sacrifice on Elijah's altar, or the flames that marked God's appearance on Mount Sinai, or the burning bush when Moses was called by Yahweh. Fire both destroys and it refines. And Jesus' reference here is not to physical destruction, but to a spiritual upheaval, a burning away of the old ways, of complacency, of the status quo. It was always more of the same, and Jesus wanted to change that. And the only way to change it was to be radical. The baptism Jesus speaks of is, of course, his impending death, followed, of course, by resurrection. But let's focus on the death and the suffering for now. Baptism in the New Testament is a metaphor for passing through suffering and being transformed. So Jesus is expressing this deep anguish and anticipation that he feels the closer he gets to the cross. The cross, which is a necessary act to kindle the fire of transformation in the world. His words about division were also very radical in that culture, a culture that prized family loyalty and unity. In Jewish society, the family was the center of religious, economic, and social life. To speak of division in the family was to strike at the very heart of communal identity. Yet throughout the Old Testament, prophets warned of times when allegiance to God would mean disruption of even the closest bonds. And this is what Jesus is talking about. And finally, Jesus chastises the crowd for their spiritual blindness. Farmers and fishermen were keen observers of weather patterns, able to predict rain or drought, except for in Underberg where I used to live, where there's a saying, only fools and tourists predict the weather in Underberg. But you get what I'm saying. I did it in the introduction. We know spring is coming. It's getting lighter. The birds are chirping. Flowers beginning to blossom. We can read those signs, but what about these important signs that Jesus is talking about? Jesus laments that the people of his time failed to recognize the spiritual signs unfolding right before their eyes. The presence of God right there in their midst, and a new era dawning. This message in this gospel reading today is urgent, and it's relevant today as well, and just as urgent. So I'd like to turn attention to three broad things that jump out for me in this passage. The first is that fire. Jesus comes to ignite a fire, a burning passion for truth, justice, and compassion that challenges the apathy and brokenness of the world. In our lives today, the fire may manifest as a call to confront injustice, to let go of our prejudices. It's so hard to do that, isn't it? Or to embrace radical forgiveness. It's a call to let God's Spirit purify us, burning away what is unworthy so that we might shine as lights in the world. The fire isn't always comfortable. Let's face it. It will challenge our habits and our relationships and our priorities. To be a follower of Christ is to be transformed, not just consoled and made to feel better. And change is hard, it can be difficult. It's to allow God's love to remake us, even if it means passing through times of trial. How teachable are we? How malleable are we? That's a question we all need to ask. The fire is the fire of Christ. The second thing, and we see more and more of this at this point in the Gospels, is the cost of discipleship, that taking up your cross. Jesus warns that discipleship could bring division, even among family and friends. You see, true peace is not the absence of conflict, but it's the presence of truth. When we take a stand for what is right, when we refuse to compromise our integrity or our faith, we could find ourselves at odds with those we love when we do this. In our context today, following Jesus might mean standing against popular opinion or cultural norms. It could mean making choices that others misunderstand or reject. It could mean correcting somebody who's behaving in an unjust manner. Jesus' words remind us that true, authentic discipleship is costly. It demands our loyalty, it demands our devotion. This doesn't mean we look for conflict for the sake of conflict. That is never being said in this passage, although I've heard it interpreted as such before. No, we don't look for conflict's sake. But when division comes because of faithfulness, we're called to respond with grace, patience, and love. Sometimes the fire Jesus brings reveals what truly matters. And so that's the second thing I wanted to reflect on, is this cost of discipleship as almost a measure sometimes of our loyalty to Jesus. And the third is the reading of the weather. the urgency of discernment. Just as crowds could read the weather, so we are called to discern the spiritual climate of our time. Here in St. Francis Bay, what is the spiritual climate? Can we read it? And will we respond? Jesus challenges us to wake up, to pay attention to what God is doing in and around us. Are we so busy with daily routines that we miss the movement of the Spirit? Are we content with comfortable religion, while Christ is actually calling us into a deeper transformation, a more committed discipleship? You know, our world is filled with signs of need, of change, of opportunity. There are all sorts of crises around us. There's injustice, corruption. There's a hunger for meaning and a search for hope. All these are signals that God is at work. And He's inviting us to respond. So we, as His people, as His followers, must become wise and attentive interpreters, ready to act with compassion and courage. And might I add, to actually pray for the gift of the Spirit of discernment. It is one of the gifts of the Spirit. Pray for discernment. This gospel reading today is a summons, not just a brief, but a summons to action. It's an invitation to let Jesus' fire purify our hearts, to embrace the cost of discipleship, and to discern God's movement in the world. That's how we respond, is when we read what is going on around us. The whole of Israel thought the Messiah was going to be this one thing, and they missed the fact that He was right there with them. The path Jesus calls us to is not always easy. Could bring discomfort, challenge, even division. But it is the path of transformation, and it leads us from complacency into the fullness and the vibrancy of life. So let's live it in Him. Amen.
How great the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. The cross has spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me His own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus. to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Jesus, yours is the victory. Oh, hallelujah. Praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah. Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name. Jesus Christ, my living hope.
Thank you for spending this time to be with us and to watch this devotion. In a sense, you're participating with us in this great work of God. And so, with those challenges that have been laid out there this morning, I invite you to reflect on that passage. And may God bless you. And I hope to see you again next week. Goodbye for now.